Hello and welcome to this edition of Trojan Talk. I'm Paige Ray. Joining us today is Dr. Rob Mathner, an Associate Director and Professor with the School of Hospitality, Sport, and Tourism Management. Rob, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we want to talk to you about some ongoing research that you've been conducting for a while now. This is not new, but you focus on collegiate sports gambling. For our viewers who may not be familiar with this topic, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So a couple different points to be mindful of. First of all, the membership, the NCAA membership, has for quite some time now basically not allowed student athletes or staff members to wager anything of value on any sport that the membership sponsors a championship in. And they did that, quite frankly, to try to remove any challenges that might be out there for student athletes to be compromised. They didn't want them to, one, bet on their own sport, or two, get into any kind of a debt that would maybe allow some unscrupulous character to come and ask them to throw a game or to not score points in a game or the like. So the membership's been pretty clear about that for quite some time. And of course, the other part is just the criminal aspect of this, which there are several criminal statutes out there that pertain to sports wagering and throwing games and sharing information, things like that. So there's a lot out there. Of course, the latest piece of news that come out really was just the Supreme Court's decision to allow more states to formally allow sports wagering to be, to take place in their state. So that was the biggest move that's happened in the last 2 years or so.
So what have you been looking at specifically? And before you answer that, I know we have a new grant that you received earlier this year to help you further a specific type of research.
Yeah, so the membership has for quite some time now been researching and surveying student athletes at the Division I, II, and III levels as it relates to their prevalence rates on wagering and gambling. And with the idea that they're wanting to see, are the educational efforts that have been undertaken, are they working? What's the climate with our student athletes? And but what was never really researched was the other side of that population group that is also bound by that rule, which are the athletics administration support staff members as well. And so our first big research study looked at the athletic trainers, the equipment managers, the academic advisors, and who else? The strength and conditioning coaches.
The people who are close.
Who are close to the athletes, to see what information do they have potentially that could be used in placing a wager on a sport in which they oversee or have knowledge of, right? And so that was our first line of research, and then we extended it to just recently knowing that the majority of students who gamble in college don't start gambling in college. They actually start gambling in high school as adolescents. And again, once again, one area that has not been studied was a subset of that group, which was the high school athletes. And so that's where we got the grant. We actually started this process pre-COVID with the idea of starting this big research project. COVID sidelined us. Didn't get a big enough of a sample, but we got enough of a response rate that got the eyes and attracted UNLV to our proposal, and we were successful in getting a grant to take this research nationwide. And so that's what we are currently doing.
I'd like to talk about another aspect of your research, which is you have been more than willing to share what you found and to warn about the potential consequences of gambling. So I know personally I've been to one of your lectures, I've heard it, and you choose to take your time out of the day to do that. So tell me why you feel like it's important to get those consequences out there.
Yeah, so I think one of the areas that's not looked into enough and there's not enough attention paid to is really the addictive nature of wagering, right? We focus on the integrity of the game as it relates to point shaving or throwing games. But the other aspect that's equally as important is the addictive nature. And gambling is very, very addictive. And the earlier you seem to be introduced to this kind of behavior, the more likely you are to get addicted to it, which can and has ruined plenty of lives across across this whole nation. So I think for me, taking a look at that, what's the prevalence rate of high school kids? And are they already getting addicted to this crazy thing called gambling and sport wagering.
And not assuming that they aren't.
Correct. You know, with more and more states legalizing not just sport wagering, but I think there's only 3 or 4 states that don't have some form of gambling within the state itself, whether it be casinos or lotteries. Certainly the culture of gambling is much more pervasive than it was just 5 or 10 years ago.
Sure, I can imagine. Now, we're almost out of time, but before we go, this research is ongoing. This is something that's still in the process. Is there anything that, our viewers could do to help, or is there somewhere they could go to get more information?
Yeah, no. If you are a high school district superintendent, an athletics director, or a principal that has the ability to make a decision to allow your high school athlete population to be surveyed, we'd love to send you the forms and the surveys. It can be done online, and we'd love to include you in our sample size. Again, everything is very anonymous. Nothing will ever be made known to anybody about who's taking your surveys or who are not taking them. But you can email me at rmathner, first initial R, Mathner, M-A-T-H-N-E-R, at troy.edu, and I'll be in touch if you send me an email. I'd love to include you in our survey.
Fantastic. Well, Rob, I hope that someone out there decides to pitch in and help. It's a very serious, important topic that I'm glad somebody is paying attention to.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Trojan Talk.